Government expresses concern over a military takeover in Myanmar. At least 9 people dead in a shootout between Islamist insurgents and security forces in Mogadishu. And late and too few, but finally rolling out. A look at Africa's COVID-19 vaccination plan. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Airtel to focus on expansion in existing markets in Africa. And in sports, CAF President Ahmad resumes his duties after his 5-year ban by FIFA was frozen by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. In our top story this hour, dozens of supporters of Myanmar's military gathered in Yangon on Monday after its move to seize control of the country and detain leader Aung San Suu Kyi. A small procession of cars and trucks drove through the streets, waving both the Myanmar national flag and the flag of the military. The country is now under a state of emergency for 1 year. The takeover comes as the country's new parliament was preparing to convene. Tensions have been escalating between the military and the civilian government since Suu Kyi's party won elections last November. The military accused her party, the National League for Democracy, of voter fraud. The Election Commission says there is no evidence to back these claims. Last week, a military spokesperson had said a coup would not be ruled out if complaints about election fraud were overlooked. On Saturday, the military said those comments had been misinterpreted. Well, Aung San Suu Kyi has a long career in politics and enjoyed widespread popularity in Myanmar. The 75-year-old has been hailed as a hero of democracy. For decades, she led a non-violent struggle against the country's military rule. In 1991, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize while under house arrest. She is the only daughter of national independence icon General Aung San. After her party, the National League for Democracy, won a landslide victory in 2015, Suu Kyi rose to power as Myanmar's state councillor, often seen as the de facto leader. But her international reputation has taken a hit in recent years for defending Myanmar's military against allegations of genocide of the Muslim Rohingya community. Now, China, which shares a border to its south with Myanmar, has also called for all parties in the Southeast Asian country to resolve their differences.
China is a friendly neighbor of Myanmar and hopes the various parties in Myanmar will appropriately resolve their differences under the constitutional and legal framework to protect political and social stability.
Right, let's turn to news now coming out of Somalia. A former military general is among 9 people killed in Sunday's attack on a hotel in the capital, Mogadishu. Security forces ended a 7-hour siege on the popular Hotel Afrique. Militant group al-Shabab has claimed responsibility for the attack. The raid began late on Sunday with a car bomb, followed by a siege that lasted into the early hours of Monday morning. The targeted hotel is popular with government officials. President Mohamed Farmajo and Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein have condemned the incident. Well, let's bring you more on this now. We're joined from Mogadishu by our reporter Abdulaziz Billo. Abdulaziz, to begin with, what is the latest on this attack and how are the survivors doing?
Well, Lindy, the situation has returned to normalcy. Security forces have once again regained control of that hotel that is located along a strategic road that links the city to the country's international airport. Scores of people who have been hospitalized who sustained injuries. Several people have been confirmed dead, including a top Somali military general who served briefly even as a defense minister in 1991 and also head of the army back in the days. He died in that attack alongside 4 others. A militant group, on the other hand, has claimed responsibility for this attack, saying that it killed 23 people, a claim which authorities here have differed. So across most hospitals here in the city, the hospitals are struggling with the number of people who were injured because many people were in that facility at that given time. Authorities say that they managed to evacuate more than 100 people who were residing in that hotel. At the time of the attack, there was no major gathering that was taking place there, but then then again, al-Shabab has been known to target such hotels and inflict heavy casualties to maximize its impact here in the city.
Abdulaziz, tell us more about the hotel. You mentioned that it is situated between the city and the airport. Why do you think it was targeted?
Well, a couple of reasons, Lindy, one of which it's the strategic location where it's located next to the airport. And before you reach the airport, there's a heavy checkpoint there where cars are checked before they enter the Mogadishu International Airport. That is the green zone area where United Nations offices are located, government ministries, the country's airport, the African Union headquarters, and some posh hotels that are located on that road. So the proximity of the airport itself is a big factor in this attack. But then again, the hotel itself, Hotel Afrique, is next to that checkpoint that I've mentioned, has been a hive of activities in recent weeks. It's been the center of clan elders who have been meeting there time and again. Opposition leaders there have been gathering to rally their support to campaign against the current President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo in the run-up to the elections. So briefly, previously al-Shabab has said that they're going to attack those who take part in the electoral process. In other words, it has said that it's going to target anyone involved in elections. So the clan elders who are there and the opposition leaders who constantly meet there have been talking about elections, and this is one thing that al-Shabab is against. So technically what al-Shabab is saying, that this was a message that is going to strike at will even in the heart of the capital, especially at a time when Mogadishu is headed towards general elections. We understand that some polls will take place in Mogadishu, the others will take place across the region, and the fact that it has threatened this election, this attack, was definitely a message that Somali security forces need to up their game, because the al-Shabab can still attack at will even in the heart of the capital.
Very concerning in an election year. Certainly might be a bumpy road to the polls. Thank you so much, Abdulaziz Billo, joining us there live from Mogadishu. Now, long-awaited coronavirus vaccinations in Africa are finally kicking off. However, at a rather slow pace and only in a few countries. South Africa is getting its first batch of 1 million AstraZeneca doses from the Serum Institute in India today, while Egypt received its latest batch of vaccines on Sunday, also from AstraZeneca. Algeria began vaccinations on Saturday after receiving 50,000 doses of the Russian Sputnik V vaccine. And the Seychelles was in fact the first African country to begin COVID-19 inoculations in January this year. Other countries on the continent that have begun vaccinations include Morocco, Guinea and Mauritius. Well, let's bring you more now on these latest vaccine arrivals in Africa. I'm joined by CGTN's Adel Al-Makhraoui. Adel, starting with you, of course. Adel, just tell us, what is the situation in Egypt? Who is getting these jabs and what is the long-term rollout plan?
Egypt has started rolling out the COVID-19 vaccines last week. It began with its first batch of 50,000 doses that came from China's Sinopharm, and the prime target for this first of its kind rollout in the country is to go to medical doctors treating COVID-19 patients who serve and staff, of course, medical doctors and staff who serve in the COVID-19 quarantine hospitals that the country has set in several governorships. After that, the health ministry says it will move forward with those who registered 65 years old or above, and those with critical chronic disease like kidney failures, cancer patients, and so on. This is the initial plan. What is the future plan? However, the ministry insisted not to give any further details or any further time plan. In a press conference, the health minister Hala Zaid held while Egypt first rolled out the COVID-19 vaccines, she insisted that there is a global instability in the flow of vaccines, and Western countries or developed countries have faced many challenges to keep the time schedule they're facing because of the continuous flow of the COVID-19 vaccines, and therefore Egypt didn't want to announce any future details until it acquires more vaccines and make sure it has enough stock for regular vaccination process.
Now, of course, that question around stock is a major concern. Egypt, of course, has a population of over 100 million people. How are people in the country reacting to this question of stock when currently there are, roughly 100,000 doses that have arrived in the country?
So we're getting two vibes here. First of all, those who have their own concerns about getting vaccinated, and this is a new vaccination, even new medication gets some popular fears to engage with, especially in the first group that will be getting these vaccinations. But for those who are waiting to get the vaccine, they're quite anxious. They have been applying and still it is not clear when their turn has come. Even when they register online with the health ministry, they don't get an estimated date. So this is a source of concern, and many want to get vaccinated to make sure that things move ahead. Overall, there's an online registration process, but what Egypt has now is just 100,000 vaccines. That's 50,000 people who will get vaccinated for now. And the country on Sunday morning has received the second batch of COVID-19 vaccines, and that time was from AstraZeneca. Here's more details in the following report.
The 50,000 doses from AstraZeneca doubles Egypt's stock to 100,000. Cairo is struggling to secure enough COVID-19 vaccines and ensure the regular flow into the country.
I think that this challenge is for all countries, not only Egypt, especially the developing countries who didn't have any productive facilities.
In total, Egypt says it has secured agreements for 100 million vaccines, 40 million of which are from China's Sinopharm, which medical teams here have started to receive. The government says most of the 60 million remaining will be the Oxford AstraZeneca jab.
The difference between different vaccines now depend on logistics, the mode of transportation and the mode of storage. The Chinese vaccine, as it is a classical vaccine, it could be transported and stored at refrigerator temperature. Other vaccines may require very low temperature. It's found here in Egypt, minus 20 or minus 80 deep freezers, but the amount of vaccine to be stored need very large number of very low temperature refrigerator.
Egypt's health minister Hala Zaid says the public health sector has the capacity to store some 140 million COVID-19 vaccines. That infrastructure is mainly suitable for traditionally manufactured vaccines.
As every person gets 2 jabs, what Egypt has a hold of is enough for only 50,000 citizens. And the country managed to secure that amount in 2 months. This is insufficient to inoculate the nation's medical staff, let alone limit the viral spread. Adar Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, that vaccination rollout underway in Egypt. Thank you so much to Adel Al-Mahrawi reporting for us there from Cairo. Now, Kenya has ordered 24 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and is expected to receive them starting next week. Zimbabwe, meanwhile, has set aside $100 million, but is yet to identify which vaccines it will be buying. Let's bring you more on this. We're joined from Harare by CGTN correspondent Farai Makutuya, and here in Nairobi we have with us CGTN's Enoch Sokolia. Enoch, let me start with you. Kenya has chosen to go with the AstraZeneca vaccine, but what do we know about the rollout plan once the doses arrive?
Well, when we talk about the rollout plan, then we look at the timelines. From the Ministry of Health, we are looking at a period between February 2021 to June 2022. Now, that period has been put into 3 phases. The first phase will begin February this year to June this year, that is 2021. Now, during that period, Kenya expects to inoculate about 1.25 million people, and the priority being given to frontline workers. We're talking about doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers, laboratory technicians, quite a number. And then after that, the country will move to the second phase, which begins in July to June 2022. The second phase will have a target group. and that is the elderly in the society, those who are between 50 years and above. And those who are having underlying issues are also put in that category, that those who are between or in the age of above 18 years old but have underlying issues. We are talking about diseases like HIV and AIDS and other conditions like high blood pressure, such conditions that have been categorized as those that make people vulnerable. Now, the third phase is likely to run concurrently with the second phase, that is between June 2021 to July 2021 to June 2022. Now, the difference is the target group. Here, they will be targeting the people who are all of the people who are vulnerable. Now, we are talking about doctors, they're also vulnerable. Those who will be left out probably because we only will be targeting 1.25 in the first phase. So those will be the second phase and are still vulnerable. They will be bungled into that group, which will be now in phase 3. Phase 3 is targeting 4.9 million Kenyans, but phase 2 will be targeting 9.7 million Kenyans. So you can see that the phase 2 will, many people will be inoculated in the phase 2 category. Please.
Thanks, Enoch. Well, let's now turn to Farai in Zimbabwe. Farai, funds, as we understand, are in the pipeline, but we don't know exactly which vaccine they'll be going to. What options is Zimbabwe considering, and why have they yet to decide which vaccine to go for?
Well, Lindy, I had an opportunity to speak to the National Task Force coordinator who's overseeing the entire COVID-19 response on Friday, and she said that Zimbabwe is being very strategic. It's looking at all the options available in terms of the different variations of the vaccines that are on the market. It's looking at all of them. It hasn't ruled out any, but what it is doing is carrying out assessments in terms of which one is best suited to the Zimbabwean environment, how best to manage, which one will be suited to the logistics in terms of transportation, storage, and refrigeration. And that is the process that is taking some time, which is why Zimbabwe is yet to identify or go ahead with the procurement of any vaccines at this point in time. It is that very meticulous process of choosing which is the best option for the country. And she did say something that has also been reiterated by the President, Emmerson Mnangagwa, that in looking for the option to go with in terms of vaccine, Zimbabwe is considering not just the effectiveness, but also the safety in terms of the population of Zimbabwe. And so once all the investigations and assessments are done, we will expect that a decision will be made. There will be a lot of advocacy, a lot of communication, and obviously, as you mentioned, funds have been availed. Zimbabwe is saying that it is targeting about 2/3 of the population. That's about 12 million doses that it hopes to procure between now and the coming months.
Farai, the coronavirus pandemic has exposed weaknesses in Zimbabwe's healthcare sector. Is there a great deal of confidence in this plan for vaccinating the population? And what is the long-term approach to really managing the coronavirus cases there?
Well, indeed, as you say, I mean, we've seen a lot of pressure that has been put on the health sector. The key message that authorities are pushing here, and in fact, everyone in the health sector is saying we should work on prevention as opposed to trying to treat people. The facilities simply just don't have the capacity to treat people should they contract the virus. And so prevention is the buzzword, which is why we are seeing some of these very strict measures being put in place in terms of lockdowns to try and prevent people from moving around, to try and prevent the spread of the virus. In terms of confidence in the sector, I think there are people who are skeptical about how much Zimbabwe can actually put towards the procurement of these vaccines. 100 million has been mentioned by Treasury. We also know that the private sector has said it is willing to assist and chip in with funds for that procurement, and I think that is what will give people some confidence, because we've seen players in the mining sector, in the financial sector, in the manufacturing sector, all saying that they were looking to get vaccines for their own employees and workforce and double up on that to provide extras to the government. And so that has given people a level of confidence that indeed some vaccines will be made available. Also the fact that there are so many options, well, a number of options, not just specifically one, that has also given people comfort that with those options on the table, Zimbabwe will be able to get, or as many Zimbabweans as possible will be able to get, vaccinated. So the long-term approach is obviously the vaccine, but in the immediate term, the major thrust is to prevent spread, which is why we continue to be under lockdown. It was extended by another 2 weeks until mid-February.
Yeah. Prevention is better than cure, as they say. Thank you so much, Farai Makutoya, joining us there live from Harare in Zimbabwe. Well, staying with this story, like many people across the world, Zimbabweans are somewhat divided over COVID-19 vaccines. This hesitancy has been fueled by misinformation and conspiracy theories.
All the vaccines that were introduced before have never been tampering with the DNA. But when you talk of the RNA vaccines and the freezer vaccines, they are talking of altering the DNA, and also we are not guaranteed of the aftermath results.
The vaccine is the only way forward because, we tried all avenues, Zumbani and so forth, but actually, scientifically, that's not, it hasn't been proven to be successful.
Already we've lost 2 million people. If you're not careful, we may continue to lose millions of people. So we need to make sure that we accept this vaccine. We need to make sure that we administer the vaccine. We have to make sure that people understand more about the vaccine. We have to make sure that we do not reject it. And this is for the betterment of our lives, especially here in Zimbabwe.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. AstraZeneca will deliver millions of additional COVID-19 vaccines to the European Union amid a bitter dispute over a shortfall in supply. The EU is facing growing global backlash over a plan to control the export of vaccines. Tony Waterman has more from Brussels.
Brussels says that AstraZeneca has agreed to deliver 9 million additional doses of its COVID-19 vaccine in the first quarter, bringing the total number of shots to 40 million, which is better than what the company had offered earlier in the week, but still far below what was initially expected. In a tweet, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called it a step forward and said deliveries would start a week earlier than scheduled and that AstraZeneca will expand its manufacturing capacity in Europe. Now, it's not immediately clear if the additional doses will come from within the bloc or from manufacturing sites in the United Kingdom. But this comes after an intense week of clashes between the EU and AstraZeneca over a shortfall in vaccine deliveries. Earlier in the day, von der Leyen met with the CEOs of companies manufacturing vaccines, including AstraZeneca. And while they didn't discuss the overall current shortfall in supply, they did talk about preparing for new variants and future pandemic-type threats. The Commission says that it will launch a pilot program to fund the design and development of vaccines and scale up manufacturing so that it can be prepared in the future. This is all taking place as Brussels grapples with an escalating public relations crisis over new rules that require companies to get permission before shipping COVID-19 jabs outside of the bloc. In what is seen as a major blunder, Brussels initially said that it would extend these export controls to Northern Ireland by triggering an emergency clause in the Brexit deal, essentially introducing checks at the Irish border. Now, officials were forced to quickly backtrack after a flurry of angry phone calls from Dublin, Belfast, and London. And on Sunday, the UK Trade Minister said Brussels had given Downing Street assurances that shipments would not be disrupted.
This is a global problem, and we need a global solution, and we're only going to be able to deal with this disease if we get everybody vaccinated across the world. So it's vital we work together. It's vital we keep borders open, and we resist vaccine nationalism and we resist protectionism.
Meanwhile, France and Germany on Sunday threatened legal action against any company that failed to deliver their vaccines on time, as the clash over delays shows no signs of quieting. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
The UN support mission in Libya has announced the candidates for an interim unity government until the general election later this year. The 45 candidates are competing for posts in Libya's presidential council and for the post of prime minister. The UN is hosting the voting process in Switzerland this week until the 5th of February. Here's Adel Al-Mahrawi with that report.
Libya is on the brink of a major political breakthrough. For the next 5 days, the United Nations support mission in Libya will be hosting the voting process to appoint an interim executive authority to govern the country until December's general election. Politicians from the Libyan Political Forum will be selecting members for a new presidency council and the prime minister for an interim unity government.
If a consensus is reached, this will be a step forward. It will not be a conclusion to the Libyan conflict. It is still important because it will highlight to the Libyan public that these names will lead Libya during the next period.
The UN mission's announcement and the voting are among the final steps in Libya's political marathon, which aims to form a presidency council and an independent government. They should live up to the tasks assigned to them. The most important is the general elections on December 24.
During the rather complex voting process, the 24 candidates running for the Presidency Council will be divided into lists. Each must have a head for the council and 3 deputies, one to represent each of Libya's 3 geographical regions. Once that is settled, Libyans participating in the vote will choose a prime minister from a list of 21 politicians. The person should come from a different region than the head of the Presidential Council.
This is a colonial inherited regional division to Libya. We should get rid of it instead of making it a foundation for distributing positions. It is unfortunate that it exists. However, we shouldn't focus on that concept during this stage. The main achievement is to form a unity government, and we should focus on making that successful.
The candidates come from different ideological and political backgrounds. This means that there will still be room for disputes to erupt between the elected and the other factions. Therefore, I believe the political process needs more popular support to succeed.
Aqila Saleh, currently the Speaker of the Eastern-based Parliament, is among the top candidates to lead the Presidency Council, while the scale for the Prime Minister's vote could tip in favor of the Western-based Government of National Accord's Interior Minister, Fathi Bashagha. Adel Al-Mahrawi, CGTN.
Somali leaders are scheduled to meet today in an effort to end a months-long impasse over a delayed general election. The polls in the Horn of Africa nation have been postponed several times over differences between federal and regional leadership. From Mogadishu, here's CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo with the latest.
The summit is taking place in the central Somali town of Dusamareb. Leaders of the country's 5 regional administrations, the federal government and the governor of Banadi region are meeting for 3 days, aiming to strike a deal on the planned general election. Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo made assurances of his administration's willingness to hold free and fair and transparent elections. The summit comes less than a week before the official tenure of the current administration comes to an end. Residents of the capital, Mogadishu, have welcomed the latest initiative to end the poll dispute.
We hope that the summit will be the end of all past differences between the federal and the regional leaders. We want our leaders to be on the same page as we all head into the elections.
We expect a positive outcome from the upcoming conference, a Somali-led solution for the way forward. We expect it to create a common path to the realization of a fair and democratic vote.
In September last year, regional and federal leaders agreed on conducting indirect elections after efforts to hold democratic polls for the first time in half a century failed to materialize. Under the plan, regional parliaments will pick new senators, while an electoral college will elect new lawmakers. A single member of parliament will be elected by 101 delegates. The deal also stipulates that both houses of parliament will elect a new president.
The leaders meeting there must make concessions, or else the talks will yield no breakthrough. We are seeing increased pressure from the international community, which is critical at this stage. Somali leaders must agree now, because there will be no point of dialogue if it's not done in good faith.
The United Nations top envoy to Somalia, James Swan, has welcomed the new round of talks.
We commend the President's initiative in convening this meeting and urge constructive participation by FGS and FMS leaders in a spirit of compromise to reach agreement together on rapid implementation of the September 17 electoral model.
Elsewhere, the country's Senate will be expanded to 67 after the country's president signed into law a resolution passed by Somali lawmakers last year. Meanwhile, opposition lawmakers argue that the government is trying to use the 13 additional seats for Banaadir region as a campaign tactic, a claim authorities deny. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Coming up in your business news. Airtel to focus on expansion in existing markets in Africa. And a look at US President Joe Biden's trade tasks as he settles into office.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business news now. Ever since the Ethiopian government announced that it would be liberalizing the country's telecom sector in 2019, there has been a flurry of interest from players all around the globe looking to capitalize on this previously untapped market. Airtel Africa, however, has a different agenda. CGTN's Terry Wangari explains.
Airtel Africa's CEO has ruled his company out of the running for a telecoms license in the much-coveted Ethiopian market. The telecoms firm wants to focus its energies on the 14 countries it has already invested in.
We have a lower market share in Nigeria, Congo, DRC, Tanzania and Kenya. And our entire current focus is on these countries in order to grow. We are not looking at bidding for Ethiopia at this stage.
Its Nigerian subsidiary has collected national identity numbers from nearly half of its customers. This is part of a process to adhere to regulator demands to add valid national identification numbers to every SIM card registered in the country.
People are also very clear and very conscious that they need to keep their mobile number, and they are trying to get their national identity numbers registered. So all this is, but I do believe that this could require a little more time, and we may not be able to complete the full exercise. In which case, after all efforts, if we don't manage by February 9th, then we will, I am sure, discuss with the government and request for some extension.
After Airtel Kenya's merger with Telkom fell through, the company has invested on expanding its rural network as a way to compete with market leader Safaricom.
What was the thinking behind the merger was, instead of two small players trying to compete with Safaricom, the giant, we would combine resources and pool and do it. But for whatever reason, that has not happened. So we on our own have started investing. We have a much stronger balance sheet as Airtel Africa. So we have gone ahead and invested in solo on our own to compete with Safaricom. As you know, we've been consistently gaining market share over the last few years, and we are going quite handsomely in Kenya. on our own.
The company still sees voice as crucial to growth in the future, as huge swaths of the continent are still underusing their phones as costs remain high. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Data from the Bank of Tanzania shows a massive decline in both volume and value of cleared checks over the last 6 years. This as the banking sector adopts digital payment systems. The value of check transactions in the country has decreased by over 65% from $3.3 billion in 2014 to about $1 billion in 2019. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
Technology is changing the way Tanzanians are making payments. Digital transactions are contributing to a decline in the number of check transactions in the country.
Check transactions, they are really declining. If you look at from once, just from the 3 years back, 2017 into 2020, you see like a 22% of the check transaction, both in value and volumes, they've actually declined quite significantly. And you see much of the transactions are migrating to electronic payments. And for the same period, you can see a 21% increase.
The Tanzania Bankers Association says many banks are currently offering mobile banking, internet banking, as well as payments through points of sale, which have reduced the need for checks. It claims reduced costs brought about by digital transactions are benefiting banks and their customers.
The decline of check transactions in Tanzania is reflective of a global trend. It's being fueled here, partly by the growing use of mobile money.
Figures from the Tanzania Communication Regulatory Authority show there are currently more than 30 million mobile money accounts in the country. More than 6 million were registered within just 1 year. And convenience appears to be driving the rise in mobile money transactions.
It's quite fast, it's instant. It takes lesser time. Seconds, you just do your transaction. But for check, it's a process. You have to go to find a bank. It has to be opening hours. Yeah, 3 days clearance to take. But if you send your money through your mobile phone, it's instant and very fast. The fund is on the other side.
Countries like South Africa and Namibia have already abolished payments via checks. The growing digital transactions could lead Tanzania down a similar path. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
A new approach to trade is one of many areas of business U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to tackle. His predecessor, Donald Trump, renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement and started a trade war with China. CGTN's Alistair Baverstock has more on where the U.S. is headed now.
After a tumultuous 4 years for free trade under President Trump, North America will now be trying to get back to business. Yet, so far, President Biden has not differed so much from his predecessor. The new administration's trade team has been stacked with familiar faces from Trump's North American Free Trade Agreement renegotiations.
I look forward to
including Catherine Tai as his top trade executive, a lawyer who was key not only in convincing Democrats to adopt the new USMCA, but also led the litigation of Washington's tariffs dispute with China at the World Trade Organization. Luis Rosano was a member of Mexico's team for those renegotiations and says the politicization of trade in recent years will have a long legacy.
The union leaders, traditionally Democrats, that they would really want to push forward their thinking within the USMCA, but you also have a more centrist President Biden that wants to recover the trust of blue-collar workers that most of them voted for Trump. That means that you have like the perfect storm coming on because they will try to charge these political issues.
For Mexico, that means higher worker wages, the tightening of previously lax environmental regulations, and protecting workers' rights to unionize, the lack of such stipulations having been a major selling point for doing business in Mexico before. It's a hard line to enforce, and one which will mean new challenges for Mexico.
The new U.S. administration will prioritize the enforcement of the new agreements which Mexico negotiated. So Mexico will no longer be able to attract business through its lower factory wages. So the increased production costs here must be compensated with greater productivity. And if Mexico doesn't take on this challenge, it will result in companies leaving the country.
Indeed, just like Trump, bringing those jobs back to America will be one of President Biden's goals. But making that happen is more complicated than a free trade deal, even if the new arrangement favors the United States.
You can bring wealth and you can bring technology and you can bring, innovation. But actually, there are so many of those jobs that are fighting against automation and digitalization. But I think that these issues are going to be flying around for the next months, if not years.
As President Biden begins his administration with a closely guarded hand on international trade, analysts say Mexico may be facing 4 more years of the same trade policies. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Mexico City.
General Motors plans to sell all its gasoline and diesel-powered cars by 2035. This is in line with the firm's plans to become carbon neutral by 2040. The announcement came out about a week ago, or rather about a week after President Joe Biden took office, pledging to tackle greenhouse gas emissions and dramatically boost the sales of electric cars. GM sold to over 2.5 million vehicles in the United States last year, only about 20,000 of which are electric. The automaker said in November it was investing $27 billion in electric and autonomous vehicles over the next 5 years. That's up from $20 billion planned before the coronavirus pandemic. You are watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Libyan women revive an age-old tradition of weaving after a decade of war.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
In the Libyan town of Tawergha, women are reviving an age-old tradition of weaving after a decade of war. The craft also offers women a way to earn an income. Let's take a look.
In an abandoned school in Tawergha in Libya, Halima Mohammed is busy knotting date palm leaves into something beautiful. Her father and sisters have been working in basketry for almost 50 years. She tapped into it 20 years ago.
This craft belonged to our ancestors. We hope as long as we are alive to teach it to our children because it provides a sufficient income, thanks to which we don't require the help of anyone.
Libya has been riven by civil war ever since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. And Halima's town was once a flashpoint in the country's decade-long war. For some, the town's ancient tradition of weaving offers a way to earn an income, as well as resuming a way of life that the war had stopped.
It has been 6 or 7 months since we last received our salaries from the state. But when customers buy a large quantity of our products, we get enough money to live on and to cover our daily expenses. However, we suffer from the lack of palm leaves and dye, which we use for the handicrafts.
A workshop run by a local group and supported by the International Organization for Migration brought in experts to help perfect the weaving techniques.
The floor mats used to be imported from Egypt. They are manufactured in a different way there, during which different materials are used. The Egyptian floor mats dominated the Libyan market, while the floor mat made here in Tawergha was a big competitor among the imported products.
The weavers hope authorities will promote exports to allow this craft to prosper. Chamkono, CGTN.
A global art project, Beyond Walls, has made its way to Cape Town. Artist Sape uses his work to break the chains of political and social norms around the world. He chose South Africa to be part of his latest project based on its past and the hope that it represents despite disparities that still exist. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
A striking black and white mural on Cape Town's Sea Point promenade brought a much-needed break from South Africa's tedious lockdown. It was one of 3 installations depicting a chain of human hands by French-Swiss artist Sape, bringing a message of hope.
The goal of the project is to create the biggest human chain, so it's a traveling project. We go to city to city, and the idea is to make it happen for several years and to connect more and more people all around the world.
Renowned as a pioneer for linking street art and land art, Sape worked with local artists to bring the eco-friendly artworks to life.
The first time we talked about this project was exactly a year ago, in January 2020. And for the past 6 months, a team of about 50 people in South Africa has been busy. And it goes from permits to drones to sourcing the material. So it's a lot of preparation, and the better the preparation, the quicker the work.
Someone that's well known like Sape comes to these communities, puts a piece into communities with the kids. That's when this place will get recognized. That's when people will start paying attention to the infrastructure that these kids are staying by. And then they'll compare to a place maybe like Sea Point.
Beyond Walls project has reached over 30 cities across the world, including Berlin, Geneva and Paris. South Africa's rich history and its colorful townships attracted the artists to the mother city.
For sure, with the black story of apartheid in South Africa, I wanted to see that, with my own eyes. But I can say that I was very moved. However, in the township, the people are so warm. Okay, we know that it's dangerous. We know that there's some insecurity, but when we arrived and all the people got the arms open to welcome us, and it was one of my best experiences in my life.
Sape's social activism has earned him global recognition. He's modest about being picked by Forbes magazine as one of the most influential people in the world under 30.
I really trust that art can serve humanity and change some lines, remove some lines in a social system or in a political system. So I really trust that we can change the world using art. It's an honor to be known by Forbes. I'm more proud about what I can do in reality.
This gigantic work of art has now faded, but its powerful message lives on, inviting people to show kindness to one another and to live peacefully. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And coming up in your sports news. Ahmad resumes his duties after his 5-year ban by FIFA was frozen by the Court of Arbitration for Sport.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin with football, where Confederation